another minute or two before we start. Hi, everyone. Welcome. All right. That is time. We'll just maybe wait another minute, 30 seconds to see if we have anyone else join us. I'm really excited to kick this off and just want to wait and see if anybody else joins us last minute.
Kayla, on the Eventbrite thing, the details were the meeting's at 12, but the Eventbrite link said 11. Just so you know.
Yeah, we screwed up a little bit in that sense. We had someone else message us on European time saying that the time was wrong. I sent an email out about 50 minutes ago to apologize for any confusion, and I hope those folks who tried to join us earlier on can now join us at this time.
I'm glad not to have missed it. Fantastic.
Yeah. Our apologies for any confusion about the start time of this event. Both Carl and I are joining you from different time zones. We are both outside of Oxford for the time being, and our great apologies if anybody was trying to join in. Sorry also now for showing you my email. I just want to make sure that one of our presenters can join us, and then we'll start in a minute. Carl, if you want to say hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I am Carl. I am the other person presenting today, filling in for Kayla whilst she does the emails. We will start in a moment, just making sure.
All right. Do we have all of our presenters with us now?
Yes, I think so.
Great.
I see them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're just about to get started. Let's just wait for Nick to sign on, and then we can take it away. Oh, goodness. I hope we didn't mess up too badly with the time confusion. Again, apologies if you thought the meeting started an hour ago. I tried to send out a message through Eventbrite. I scheduled the meeting from a different time zone, so I probably didn't take enough care to indicate that the meeting is starting now at 12 p.m. British time. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really, really excited to be sharing just a slice of our experience with the OxAir social research component. Now, let me just make sure that all of our presenters have joined us. Do we see Nick?
I think I did see Nick.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so let's begin. Can everybody see the opening slide? Carl, does that look good?
I think so, yes. Yes, it looks as I remember it.
Okay, good. I'm just being extra cautious. All right, so welcome everyone to the virtual open house for the OxAir social research process. My name is Kayla Schulte. I'm a DPhil at the Department of Sociology and the Leverhulme Center for Demographic Science at the University of Oxford. And I'm currently in Paris, coming to you from Paris. So if you hear some church bells in the background, that's what that is. Just to go through a few housekeeping items, here's the agenda. I'm going to start off with a short introduction by Carl and myself. I'll let him introduce himself afterwards. Then we're going to launch into a presentation of the OxAir Competency Group process and experience. Then we will showcase some of our key outputs and present some opportunities for interested individuals to get further involved with the OxAir process and project. And then we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So again, housekeeping items, I have them on my other slide. We'd like to record today's session. So if you are not okay with being recorded, please turn off your camera and consider not speaking over the microphone. If you're okay speaking and having your voice recorded, then by all means. Also, if you want to ask a question and you don't want to be included in the recording, you can message me via email. You should have gotten my email by through Eventbrite, but I can put it in the group chat. So just let me know that you don't want to be included, and we'll be sure to cut you out. So with that, I will start recording the session. Okay. Oh no, we're recording already.
Sorry, yes, I pressed the button. I should have waited until he'd given everyone the information.
Yes, we try to do our best to be ethical with this, but okay, we're recording. All right.
Only Kayla does.
So yes, please hold all your questions till the end and post them in the chat box. We'll address them that way, and we'll read them out and we'll respond to them accordingly. All right, let's get right into it then. Welcome. And what we're presenting to you today is a component of a larger overarching initiative referred to as the OxAir project that some of you may have heard about. And this project originally came together when a team of environmental scientists, representatives from the Oxford County Council and City Council, as well as public health and social science researchers, applied for and received funding from DEFRA. So that's UK's Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I always get that messed up, Rural Affairs. To collect air quality data around the city using portable air quality monitors. And when we submitted our application, we stated our overarching goal to generate reliable air quality data from a human perspective. So this lofty goal was inspired by the current state of local air quality management. For those of you who don't know about this, local air quality management currently relies on a relatively small number of stationary monitors to evaluate air quality conditions at the local level. And this paradigm dates back to the 1970s, so it's a bit outdated. And more these days, we're seeing emerging portable sensing technologies that are promising, but have yet to really be incorporated into the local air quality monitoring and management regime due to concerns over reliability of this data, among other factors. And in addition to that, when thinking about the current local air quality monitoring and management regime, we also still rely on somewhat outdated modes for engaging the public and incorporating insights and experiences into air quality governance. So what you're going to hear today from us is our attempt to address the public engagement component and try and bring it into the future, bring it into the present, really. So I'm going to turn it over to Carl now to talk about what theory and ideas motivated this portion of the OxAir project.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, so in designing this project, obviously, as Kayla said, we had this very particular remit to try and deliver a human perspective on air quality issues in Oxford. And so we really wanted, when designing our methodology for this, to try and challenge a couple of quite enduring tropes within environmental management, one of which being that it is a collection of issues that is predominantly or even only addressed through making recourse to scientific or technological solutions. There is a prevailing idea that these are the only holders of the answers, the only relevant information, when in fact we know that publics do hold very valuable insight into many of these issues. And without hearing, or indeed without listening to those, our research will always be a little more impoverished for that. The other thing that we really wanted to challenge was prevailing models of scientific communication on environmental issues. And there is, again, a prevailing model, this deficit model, which is by now sort of notorious, which is this idea that you can just shower more information onto the general public and they'll just get it and transform their lives, and all of these problems will just go away. Well, we know that it doesn't work like that, and actually one of the main problems of that way of thinking is that it doesn't make spaces for those governance models and the management to actually think, are we doing this the right way? Are we listening to the right people? Are we incorporating a diverse enough source of information and relevant perspectives? So these were some of the considerations that went into the way that we designed this research. We wanted to create some kind of method which would allow different stakeholders, members of the public, people working in air quality management, policymakers, scientists, to be present in the same space and be able to have a sort of meaningful dialogue with each other. And whereas in other projects, quite often the public are consulted on things, we wanted to make a meaningful difference between being consulted and then ignored for the sort of knowledge production process, and instead pursue something more like co-production, where all of these different stakeholders are doing this work together and on a kind of equal playing field.
Yeah, so just to build on what Carl was saying and to speak a little bit about the method that we adopted, when we first learned about this project, it just seemed like a really blatant and ideal opportunity to trial a more experimental approach to generating new knowledge in an open space that involved residents and air quality managers, considering the dynamic of the OxAir steering committee, that it was already this group of motivated individuals, but more from the specialist side of things, that really wanted to kind of take a step into the present and trial a new approach to air quality monitoring. So Carl and I looked to a method originally developed and tested by a group of academics from the University of Oxford, alongside local residents, to approach flooding issues in the town of Pickering. And this method was proposed by Sarah Watmore, Katarina Landstrom, and it established what was referred to as a competency group, which included local residents affected by the particular environmental challenge, alongside environmental scientists, specifically in this case, flood modelers, and then the social scientists, Katarina Landstrom and Sarah Watmore. And in the case of Pickering, this method proved to be an effective tool at orchestrating multi-stakeholder discussion, and they were able to come up with a kind of unthought of solution to their flooding challenges that ended up being the product of discussions with affected members of the public, and it was a solution that really resonated with kind of the widest group of stakeholders possible, and it just happened to be lower cost than what DEFRA and the Environment Agency were thinking of originally. So it kind of just was wildly successful, and we thought, why don't we try and adapt this for our challenge of air quality in Oxford? So we adapted this method for our purposes and for the purposes of the OxAir project. And we spent 6 months trying to solicit participants for the group. And the goal was to have a mixture of residents and a portion of the OxAir steering committee. So the technical air quality monitoring and data specialists. We also had an air quality manager, Pedro, from the city council, and then we had myself and Carl as the social scientists, along with a group of residents that we took about 6 months to solicit participation from, to try and find individuals who were interested but not already deeply embedded in air quality action and governance, and also develop a group that was demographically representative of the Oxford City population. And we succeeded in doing that. And then we began our process of meeting and coming together and discussing air quality monitoring in Oxford. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Nick to talk us through the process that we engaged in over the course of about 7-8 months, if you count COVID. So Nick, I'm gonna move it over to you and change the slide. How does that look?
Okay, perfect, thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to give a brief introduction of the different sessions that we engaged in as part of the OxAir group. But first, I'm just going to give you a bit of background about myself. I am a medical statistician at the University of Oxford, and I moved to Oxford about 2 years ago, and so I'm still a relatively new resident. But I have been interested in air pollution and air quality management, and I've sort of been interested from a couple of different perspectives. So one of sort of the more personal perspective is that I do have asthma, which is negatively impacted by poor air quality. But also the fact that my family, in particular, both my parents, are involved in air quality research and local air quality groups in Canterbury and Kent. So I came into the idea of looking at air quality management in Oxford sort of with some level of experience, but in terms of practical experience, I had very little. But when I saw this group advertised, I thought this sounded like quite an interesting process to be a part of, and quite a unique take on looking at air quality by including local residents and looking at our perspectives of air quality in Oxford. So the first session, when we held it at the end of last year, what we did is we got a group. I think there was about 12, 13 people in, and it was a really good mix of, as Kayla has mentioned before, people who are involved in the process of air quality management in Oxford. So we had people from DEFRA, from the council, medical doctors involved in air quality research, all the way down to people who have no real experience in the scientific process. And so it's really interesting to have that sort of mix of ideas in one session and to talk about the same issues and different perspectives that we all have on air quality. And so we introduced everyone, we all got our ideas out, and we started to talk about our perspectives of air pollution around Oxford and how it impacted our daily lives, and what our sort of daily routines consisted of. So as you can see from the picture, what we did is we got physical maps of the city of Oxford. And at first we talked about our daily activities, so where our daily commutes were, how we travelled around Oxford, and what our perspectives of air pollution was in Oxford. And to do this, we also highlighted where we thought the areas that had poor air quality were, where we thought areas that could benefit from some form of monitoring would be, and also how we thought that the air pollution affected us on a sort of day-to-day basis. And it was really useful to have this physical map so we could really get an idea of where we thought the areas of interest were in Oxford. And unsurprisingly, we all tended to, despite having different backgrounds and coming from different areas of Oxford, we all tended to focus on the same areas and the same problems. So places such as the High Street in Oxford and Cowley Road during rush hour were areas that we highlighted as sort of residents with no particular experience in air quality management as areas of interest that we wanted to explore further. The plan after the first session was to take handheld monitors, which measured things like particulate data and I think nitrous oxide, and to take them on our daily commutes, to take them to the areas that we thought were had poor air quality, and to measure that data and then review it back in another OxAir group session. However, as with these gadgets, they don't always work, and especially when people such as myself who are sort of not particularly au fait with using these sorts of things, we ran into a number of issues. And so we postponed the reviewing of the data till the third session. So in the second session, we actually covered some really interesting ideas about the medical issues that poor air pollution can cause. And also we went into some of the more technical details of the sensoring, the handheld monitors, and why they may or may not always work. So that was a really interesting to get a background to why the monitors we used were sort of playing up, but what actually the reason for that we were using the handheld ones and not the sort of stationary ones. So it was a really interesting discussion. And then in the third session, we finally had the chance to actually use those handheld monitors, go out and collect the data that we collected ourselves. So we used these handheld monitors and we went along our daily routes, and we were able to look over the data in the third session, which was really, really interesting. So this is the session where we were able to check whether our perspectives of poor air pollution in Oxford actually matched the data we picked up from the handheld monitors. And it definitely threw up a couple of surprises. So the handheld monitors aren't necessarily the most accurate measurements, considering we had them for a couple of days each. So we weren't able to pick up a really, really in-depth picture in terms of the data provided. But we were able to get a rough idea of where the sort of air pollution spikes were and whether it matched with our perspectives before coming in, before using the handheld monitors, and see whether they married up in that instance. And it was also interesting to see that despite the data issues we did have, that the individual data we collected, the individual air pollution handheld monitors did provide a level of useful information for the people who would then go on to look at them and use them and see where the issues were and how we could get over them. So that was a really interesting session. And the final two sessions, we wanted to talk about what we would get out of the group as members, what our outputs would be, and we also had brief discussions about the local air quality management in Oxford and what was being done, what the plans were for the next sort of few years, which was an interesting thing because I've not really been involved in that aspect before. And then we also talked about our outputs, what we plan to get out of the meeting, for example, this sort of open house Zoom session, and what we as members got out of the meetings. But I think we'll go into the outputs more in later slides. But yeah, so that was just a brief introduction of what we did and what we got out of it.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was a great little summary of something which, as Kayla said, took many, many months to do, so difficult to summarize. But yeah, I think you can get a sense of just how diverse the types of engagements we had in these sessions was. We tried to represent aspects of everyone's areas of expertise and insight. And as Nick also mentioned, there were also setbacks, there were hitches, there were things that happened that were quite unexpected and that we hadn't planned, hence having to actually add an additional session. And I think in the end, that proved to be something which was quite positive in many respects, because it required us to become very inventive in the way that we addressed the goals of the project, and we had to become very active in discussing how we get around these issues. So the problems arose from the use of the portable sensors by various members of the group, and naturally there wasn't a lot of prior familiarity with that technology, and so it was difficult to get them functioning as they were intended to. And all of these sorts of idiosyncrasies you can't necessarily predict in advance. So, we had to, in a sense, fill in gaps that we hadn't anticipated being there with other forms of data. For example, it was really clear when people started to contribute their own anecdotal knowledge about areas of Oxford, other senses, prior knowledge, which sort of, in a sense, did the things that we had hoped the census would do. And it created a very interesting and dynamic conversation where you had scientific, technological, and more sort of social and cultural and human perspectives coming together. So that was incredibly interesting, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the outputs. I thought it also produced some interesting results in terms of how we think about communicating scientific processes. A lot of people coming into the process, as Nick mentioned, didn't necessarily have a very technical background, but everyone has their own particular ideas or expectations about how work like this functions. And as the process of the competency group framework went on, these ideas began to change from all of us on every side of the group. And we all came out of it with a different idea, perhaps, of how environmental management and air quality management happens. So that was a sort of a key finding, and we'll see more how that sort of developed in the outputs, as I said. But for now, I'd like to ask another one of our resident participants to reflect a little bit more about her experience of changing ideas, ideas about the whole monitoring and management process, and how her expectations and ideas changed throughout the course of the sessions. So I will ask Nancy, if you're there, to come and talk to us a bit about that.
Hi there, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Cool. So I'm Nancy Gladstone, and I'm a long-term Oxford resident. I grew up in Oxford. I went to school in Summertown at Jarwell School. So I come from a bicycling family and a bicycling city, so I've always cycled to work, even when I was living in London years ago. I currently work part-time in a support role in a research group in the Oxford Centre for the Environment, Smith School. So I should say that I did study sciences at university, and I tend to read a lot of science and environment news and look up the background. So generally fascinated. And I just mentioned this because it probably affected my experience with the group and how I kind of started and ended up feeling about the whole process. So as a parent and one who cycles a lot with my child, I got really interested in air pollution after I became increasingly angry with car and van drivers sitting with the engine on outside my son's primary school in Marston. From about the age of 3, he tends to get asthma whenever he gets a cold. So, of course, it occurred to me, is this to do with air quality? And speaking to other parents made me realise that I wasn't the only person who was concerned about air quality in Marston and possible effects on health. So, you know, as well as road safety, we were all generally concerned. So we set up a school travel action group. And at that point, I found out about the OxAir project. And when I heard of the OxAir competency group, I hoped that might be a way to kind of inform this work with the school, and also a chance to understand more about air pollution for myself. So I'm going to talk about my experiences of participating in the competency group. When we got the sensors, I was really excited about cycling around with them and collecting outdoor air quality information, but I also found that I really wanted to use it to try to get some sort of quantitative evidence about indoor air quality in my house. And I'd encountered the idea of indoor air pollution in sort of developing country contexts where cooking's done over open fires, but I hadn't really thought about it in the UK context. So when this came up at the OxAir meetings, I was really intrigued and I was kind of concerned. So on the days when I had the sensor, I tried to do some data collection with the sensor to see if it was picking up a difference between cooking with the kitchen door open or the window open, or cooking with, you know, no ventilation. And I decided after getting the data back that you could see a bit of a difference in the readings, but I haven't really ended up feeling certain about whether it's like a definite health concern. And I've been much stricter about, but if you see the graph here, the bits, you can see those scary green lumps overnight in my house. So I'm still kind of intrigued about what was exactly going on there with the sensor. And as a result of this whole kind of process of thinking about this and trying to use the sensors, I've definitely become much stricter about opening the kitchen door. And I hope soon to be able to buy an electric oven and replace my gas cooker. So in a general way, one thing I sort of started to realize when I was waiting to see the sensor data from my journeys was that I was kind of wanting to get a kind of validation from the sensor to make sure that my concerns were reasonable, and like to check how my perception of air quality is matching up to what I would see as like the valid scientific information. And kind of just so that I could point to the graphs and say to somebody, this is a terrible problem. I'm not just an anxious Oxford cycling person cycling around bothering people about something that doesn't matter. But as we went through the process, as Nick and Carl have said, it was kind of becoming clear that the sensors were and how you would use the information from the sensors were quite early stages. So I might not actually end up feeling this kind of validation. Yes, it's terrible around where I live. It's terrible in my house. And this was, as Nick said, because we just took the sensors out for short periods. So the weather and the variation of traffic patterns, if you're only looking in a short period of time, isn't going to really indicate like my personal exposure to air pollution on my particular journeys through my life. And also because it's quite hard to present the information that comes out of the sensors, which is like second by second air quality monitoring, and the way that it sounds like that you give the safe level, you indicate, you legislate over what a safe level of exposure to these pollutants is, varies with timescales and units and different ways of expressing health risks. So I basically realized there's a lot more to learn for me, and in fact for everybody. So I felt a little bit disappointed at the times with the glitches in the data that was collected, and because I kind of wanted to be able to march about waving my data and win arguments. But despite it being this kind of journey for me, it has been a great chance to get a real insight into the challenges of air pollution monitoring and management. And it's kind of made me realize that whether it's despite of or because of my science education and background, I kind of have a really idealistic view of scientists riding in with answers to save the world. And it's been brought home to me through this project that understanding the numbers is just one part of the story. So how information flows through into policy development and decision making takes a lot more. And over the last period, seeing with the COVID-19 situation, we're seeing you know, how health risks affect people in different circumstances in different ways, and you can't always immediately take the healthy expert recommended decision, whether that's buying a better cooker or staying at home. So that's a bit of a digression, but I kind of wonder, as an individual, what are the effects of having access to this moment by moment information on health risks, and you know, what does it leave you thinking that, oh, if only I had all the information, I could do exactly the right thing for my health and my family at all times. And I think this way of understanding the world has consequences for people and for policy making. So I've been looking back at my sensor data that I got earlier this morning, and I'd love to go back and bug the OxAir scientists for more feedback on it, recognizing it was a very short period in a very local life. But I think they probably have other priorities. I know they're already working on some of the outputs and recommendations that Catherine's going to speak about next. So just to finish my little bit, I would really like to have another chance to use an air quality sensor for longer and use it to check whether my house air quality does actually improve when I get my new oven. And I'm excited about the possibilities of using it more with schools and encouraging traffic reduction in my local community. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nancy. My neighbor all of a sudden is drilling, so apologies if there's a drill. I'm going to try and speak really fast to segue into the outputs and opportunities for further engagement. So Nancy picked up on basically the universe of complexities and research questions associated with, you know, what does it mean to have access to real-time air quality information? What does this mean for policy? What does this mean for individuals? And for kind of changing experiences and understandings and perceptions of exposures to air quality. And I think this project was, and this specific component of the project was so unique in that we really got to gain insight into the context and lived experience behind exposures to air pollution. And that's what portable air quality sensors allow for. And it's so important to have the opportunity to discuss in a forum with individuals like Tony and Pedro and Brian, who are our technical air quality data and sensing experts, to try and gain some insight and clarity into this data, and then to have the residents, you know, speak to their experiences. And you know, it's kind of this back and forth and this dynamic that we tried to capture and generate outputs that can kind of continue on this legacy of dialogue between sensing and sensing and data, air quality data experts, and residents that can generate insight and share insight into experiences and areas of concern, so we can kind of really facilitate a more co-productive environment for air quality governance in Oxford and Oxfordshire. Unfortunately, the grant only allowed us funding for Oxford City, and that was, you know, it's silly because obviously air quality can't be contained within county boundaries or city boundaries. So, you know, that's obviously a topic for further research. And our outputs can hopefully address the wider community and then move the practices that we've trialed beyond Oxford and even Oxfordshire. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Carl to present the first of 3 of our outputs that we're going to present to you. Our outputs are both idea-based and actual physical tools that you can interact with. So take it away, Carl. Sorry, I'm rambling.
That's all right. Yeah, so as Kayla said, we have a number of different types of findings and outcomes that have come out of this process, and we're just going to introduce 3 here, even though there are, I think, closer to 6 or 7. But the first that I will briefly introduce is really just taking its name from what we said earlier was the sort of the remit of this project, which is this human perspectives approach. And it's really, from us, just a really broad-brushed call for a general change in approach to the full universe of air quality monitoring and management. So there are different components to that, but it underpins basically all the rest of the outputs. We try to show how you might introduce a more human perspective to the methods of researching air quality in this competency group framework, by using the portable, sorry, not just the competency group framework, but through the whole OxAir project, because what is so unique about it is the fact that we're using these portable sensors. Conventionally, in the past, monitoring has been done through the use of static sensors, which are put up on a lamppost or somewhere in town, maybe a busy road, and collecting data over time on fluctuations there. But really, that doesn't represent anyone's actual experience of living in that city, let alone moving through space, being in different kinds of environments, using different types of transport, indoors and outdoors. So in the portable sensor use, there is inherently a door opening for more social scientific questions on how we kind of show this more human dimension to exposure. So that's the kind of ethos that ran through the use of portable sensors. But throughout the competency group sessions, we also tried to extrapolate a number of recommendations distilled from conversations that we've had, really addressing all different aspects of the air quality management and monitoring process. And there are many of these, and they take all sorts of shapes, but we sort of distilled them down into 4 key themes. So one of them being access to information, what sorts of information are needed by people, either practitioners or members of the public. You know, it's not just citizens needing information, it's the scientists and the policymakers too. You know, people want daily forecasts, they want transparency regarding sensor locations, whilst practitioners might want to know what kind of information people actually want to hear to make their lives easier, or how sensors, how usable they are by non-experts. The next one was new tools. Again, this is something for all parts of the process. We need to think critically about what platforms are needed for these kinds of engagement. Web tools, Catherine is going to introduce one that we devised next in a moment. You know, does that mean rolling out sensors? You know, all sorts of new tools that are needed for doing this research. The next was infrastructure changes. There were a lot of ideas in the group about specific things that people wanted to see change in Oxford, and we really solicited their ideas there. Very much a sort of carte blanche situation, didn't have to think about cost benefit analysis, just what people really wanted to see change. You know, school streets, resident only streets, all of these ideas came out. And finally, new approaches, and one of them being what I mentioned about this change of focus to a human dimensions. Something really interesting that came out was the fact that when people were taking the sensors around with them, there was outdoor and then it was indoor, and they were able to sort of monitor their exposure throughout a day, which is something which isn't really done up until now, usually approached in slightly different ways. Other new approaches, local authorities should think about the city as being, you know, a network of existing allies and contributors. There are campaign groups, there are different networks, and they should be a part of that you know, process of making change. So in all of these different categories, there are a number of recommendations that came out of this, all being our attempt to try and develop a new, more human type perspective on what has been typically quite a sort of technological type of discussion up until now. So that was the human perspectives section. I think a really important part of that was one of the outputs that we had called the map of anecdotes, and we're going to move on to that now. And I think we are going to start with Catherine telling us a bit more about how that idea developed, and then Kayla will talk about what we've done with it. So if you're there, Catherine, take it away.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. So just in terms of a bit of background of myself and why I got interested in participating in the OxAir competency group, I'm a parent of 2 children. One's now age 2 and I've got a 7-year-old as well. I'm also a cyclist and cycle to and from nursery and from picking my older child up from the school bus on a daily basis. So I'm in the traffic and experiencing some of the high levels of pollution that we face in Oxford. And so that was one of the motivations for engaging in this group. Also, in terms of my academic background, I studied anthropology, and so I really like the approach that was being taken, the participatory approach and engaging with the community on this topic. And also professionally, I work on sustainable development issues. So again, that was another driver for my interest in participating in this group. One thing I just want to add in terms of context as well, I've cycled with my youngest child since she was 6 months old, and I had really big concerns around the level of pollution she was being exposed to in a bike seat at such a young age, given the level of her face relative to the exhausts of cars. She's in a cargo bike, she was in a cargo bike seat, and it was perfectly safe, but it was physically, but whether actually the air pollution, the invisible issues were impacting her negatively were a cause for concern. So I felt that participating in this process has allowed me to also express some of my concerns, and I know others have felt the same in being able to have an avenue for us to sort of provide these views on the topic, and it makes us feel like we've been heard as well, being able to aggregate this human perception data and be able to then express that in various ways, such as this map of anecdotes. So as Nick had referred to earlier, we all have different routines, and as part of the process in this group, we map these routines. That was a really fun activity at the beginning of this process, and it provided us with the hotspots where we ourselves had identified there were concerns with air pollution on the city map, and also very much at a sort of a ward level. We all came from different parts of the city as well, and we were able then to share areas of concern, because although maybe, say for instance, I'm not going on the high street every day, when I do go on the high street, I agreed with the concerns that had been mapped by those who do go on that street in the city centre on a daily basis. So we highlighted our areas of concern on the maps, and then these have then been starting to be transposed onto this tool which came out of this whole process, because we realised there was value in mapping these qualitative insights into identifying hotspots for air pollution, sort of, and seeing that visually on a map. So it goes beyond the numerical data to actually the experiential data that we all feel when we're sort of cycling through or walking through a particular poor air quality hotspot, as it were. So the group had proposed that we transferred this data into an online tool, but also recognising that we were a really small group, and that the way that we'd been chosen also to participate in the competency group was that we were representing different geographical areas of the city. So that meant that whilst we've got insights from different areas, we don't have like the depth of insight in any particular one spot, and so the idea was that we had this map that could be online, that other residents of Oxford or people who pass through can log on and highlight where there are areas of concern that they have on particular streets, and so this is what you can see in front of you. If you click, and maybe Carl, you can do this, or Yeah, at the top of Old Road, there's a little hotspot. It's on top of Morrill Avenue, Warnford Lane. And there, for instance, this was one of the spots that I've provided feedback on. And here, this is where I experience on a daily basis the air pollution, both for myself and my children when we're going to and from the nursery, which is the Julia Durban nursery just down Roosevelt Drive there. And so this is one of the examples of a perception I've had mapped onto this. What I would do is I would encourage all of you, if you're Oxford residents or if you're familiar with the air pollution in the middle of town when you come in and out of the city, to also log on to this tool, add your anecdote. You're being shown how to do that now. Explain what your concern is and the geographical location. And if you submit that, that will go through to the OxAir team and they will then approve that, and then it will be added to the map. You can also then click on some of the existing spots. Now, you may have seen a similar tool like this for traffic accidents, for instance, where you can map traffic accidents. It works the same way, where you can then click, say, on the Iffley Road, and then if you agree with the insight that has been already placed there, then you can click agree, and that then just shows that frequency, the number of people are saying, actually, yes, I agree with the concern that has been raised with others there. So I'll leave it there, just with saying that I feel that this sort of tool is going to be really valuable with advocacy groups in the city, both as individuals, but also in terms of engaging local policymakers through groups such as Cyclox and Oxfordshire Livable Streets and others who are promoting active forms of travel and also a reduction in air pollution and the congestion in the city. So I'll leave it there, but thanks very much for engaging me in this. I've really enjoyed the process.
Thank you, Catherine. And yes, as Catherine said, it's open, it's live. Please check out this link and share it widely and contribute to it. And we'll be sharing the link again through our Twitter account, and I can send out another email through the Eventbrite guest list with this link and a link to our website where you can see the Human Perspectives documents, and you can also stay updated just by checking the oxair.org website. The last output that we wanted to share with you is very much under development. It's the hybrid map, and Carl, do you want to very quickly speak to what motivated this output?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, there was very much an idea in this running through this whole project to show that different forms of data should not be thought of as being antagonistic in any way, but actually being deeply complementary. You know, social perspectives are not there to kind of claim that, you know, science is, you know, bunk or, you know, not worth pursuing. Actually, we should look at something completely different, completely the opposite. Really, that, you know, these environmental issues, and in particular air quality in this instance, is made so much clearer, and our ideas made so much richer by having this full network of different forms of data. So this idea of different forms of data led to the idea that we might actually find a way to present these different forms of data in one single place, and that's how the hybrid data map was born, which is basically the idea being that, you know, we, on the one hand, we realized that we had data being churned out by sensors as people went around on their routes, identified on those large maps that were up on the screen when Nick was talking. And they had their perspectives, they had their stories, they had their causes, their explanations for why they think air quality is bad in certain areas. And that was a whole lot of very qualitative data, which was at the same time being registered in a more quantitative way on their sensors. So, I mean, I'm going to let Kayla talk to you about this beautiful thing she's developing, but the idea is basically being that for effective governance of air quality, how useful it would be to have not just a quantitative or not just a qualitative form of data, but a more three-dimensional hybrid form of data, which can really describe a very three-dimensional picture of what this issue is, how it behaves, and what it means to people in a range of different contexts in Oxford. So, Kayla, maybe you can just talk us through this rather extraordinary thing.
Sure, it's very much a work in progress. And I also have to give a shout out to Wando Lee, who's listening from the Transport Studies Unit, who is helping me with the back end with the R code that I'm using to develop this at the moment. But the idea is that you can visit this. It's got a website URL. So you type in the URL. This is not it right now because it's not live. Sorry, it's not live yet. And then you can select an example journey from one of the competency group members who carried around the sensor, and you're able to see their pathway through the city and what concentrations were registered by the sensor when they were on the path, and then it'll be overlaid with this qualitative information, so some context about whether they were biking or walking, or if they were going to the market, or you know, were they inside, were they cooking? Actually, maybe we won't have the indoor stuff because that's a violation of personal information, but home addresses. But anyway, we're still hammering out the details, and it's just to kind of layer on these different data sources, as Carl was saying, and the idea also is that it's interactive. So at the moment, I'm trying to work out the kinks so that when you highlight over the time series here, which shows you at the times at which different pollution concentrations were registered, it would also show up it would show you in a highlight the location of the map where that concentration was registered. So these will be linked. If you hover over this, it'll also highlight and hover over this, and you can change what you're seeing based on which example journey you want to look at. And the example journeys will show you different parts of the city and different journeys throughout the city. So yes, as I said, this is under development. It should be live soon. I'm working to get it live in the next couple of weeks, and I will also share that through the Eventbrite, and you can stay posted through the OxAir website and Twitter account. Also to mention that the map of anecdotes, the open map of anecdotes, is a prototype as well. Our plan is to kind of track it for the next year and see whether we garner support, what type of contributions we get. If we reach a certain threshold, you know, we're wondering whether there might be opportunities to partner with the city council and the county council to expand this, to infuse more resources, to make it even more user-friendly, intuitive, etc. So, so those are the plans for these tools. Also, if the hybrid map takes off, there's an opportunity to make it live as well. So, like if you do take out the sensor with you, that data could automatically be piped into this platform. So. I'm gonna stop there because we've completely eaten into the time for Q&A, but I want to open it up and give an opportunity for people to type in their questions into the chat, and we can answer some of them. And if people are okay with staying for an extra 5 minutes, I'm cool with that. But if you have to take off, no pressure. So let's open it up. Let me see if I can see the chat. Carl, can you see the chat?
I can't see an all group chat option. I can only see private chats for messaging you privately or Carl.
Yay. Weird.
Well, while we're looking for stuff, the map is phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. I think it's going to be such a useful tool for people around the whole city to start inputting information, because obviously the competency group is a small number of people, and there's a big rest of the Oxford that we can capture information as well. I just think it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. And yes, Carl, I can see. Can everybody else see what Carl just typed?
I can see it, but I can't type. But I can only type to Lydia, Kayla, or Carl.
Okay.
Well, so while we're waiting, if I could just follow up on Jake's point.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a really excellent project. I mean, speaking for Oxford Friends of the Earth, we've been working on this for 2 or 3 years. And I think the issue about particulates and domestic emissions is going to be really interesting, as this is an issue that we haven't, everyone's come up now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, just to finish. I mean, the City Council's Air Quality Action Plan out for consultation now points out that domestic, and that's a really, really broad category, is the major source of particulates rather than transport.
Mhm.
And no one really knows what those domestic particulates are. And it's easy to assume it's, people are kind of talking about wood burners, but as Nicola has said, I think it's gas cookers and cooking, but possibly central heating as well.
Yeah. And I completely forgot to mention that the pollutants that we're measuring, kind of important, but the sensors measured nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter 1, 2.5, and 10. Those are the size. They're micrograms per cubic meter. So very, very small, a fraction of the size of a hair, of a human hair. And those are primary pollutants of concern from both a health perspective and cooking, transport, emissions perspective.
Jake here, just as an anecdote to that, if I may interject, having quite a lot of sensors in my own house while I waited to give them out and put them places, I realized that actually also correct that the air quality in our own kitchen was not at all good. With one son, the first person in our family ever to have asthma. We live in a hotspot for air pollution in Oxford. So I've changed my gas stove to induction stove on eBay, although my wife complains about it a lot. Hopefully the air quality will be significantly better now.
Thank you, Jake. Does anyone have any questions, either to type into the box, which I think is now working, or if you can't see it, then out loud? And if you do think of anything in the future, you can also just write to us, because we are there by our emails all the time. So
Yes, and
engage.
this is what I'm working on for my PhD, and for the foreseeable future, so feel free to reach out to me.
One important element, I think, for this group is to what we can do next. So we want to look at the results of the OxAir study, see the fine detail of the air pollution around schools, look at the competency group outputs, but ultimately this is, and it's been indicative, and we've made a lot of progress in understanding how to use these portable sensors, which we are early adopters of those portable sensors. So we know we had teething problems at the beginning, but I think there's a real opportunity now to build on the open map and to build on our capability with these sensors to go further. And as Chris says, there is a consultation on air quality right now. And I think if we are engaged in this subject, we definitely need to reply to that. But also we need suggestions of, what next in Oxford for air pollution and research.
Thank you, everybody, for also contributing.
Can I just say, if no one's going to jump in, we have got a Clean Air Day seminar tomorrow evening. It's on the Facebook group that's in chat. Kayla's one of the speakers, and the whole point is, what can we do next? This is going to be an ongoing campaign. There's an awful lot to be done.
Yeah, if you're interested in ongoing work, I really encourage anybody to follow Oxford Friends of the Earth. Jackie's on the call as well, and she heads up the air pollution subcommittee, and there's a lot of work going on. And I think, we can hopefully bring together some members of the competency group and OxAir with Jackie and Richard Kuziara, who is also on the OxAir steering committee, to discuss next steps for schools' engagement with some of the data that we collected over the course of the project, because there was a big schools monitoring focus that is separate to what we presented to you today. This is kind of a wider public engagement component of the OxAir project, but there was a schools monitoring component, and I think it's worth bringing some of those folks together now that we're kind of wrapping things up and getting ready to submit our report to DEFRA from the OxAir steering committee, and looking to the future and how to continue on the legacy of the OxAir mission and goal of generating reliable air quality data from a human perspective. Okay, I'm just wary of the time, and I don't want to keep anybody much longer. Carl?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of interesting information coming in on the chat. The only question I see is from Chris on when the maps will be live. Well, the anecdote map is available for submission for use now, I think, Kayla, and it will be kind of steadily refined over time. And the other one is in development, but will be a couple of weeks, as you said, Kayla. But yes, I mean, unless there's any other questions, then you have our email addresses. And I also just want to thank the participants as well, who did a great job and of presenting, and have been just an amazing group of partners to go through this whole project with. It's been actually quite a long time now that we've all been sort of working together, so it's been a real pleasure and privilege to work with you lot and the others who aren't here at the moment. So that's probably all I have to say. Kayla?
Yes, I echo what Carl said, and I think with that we can close out this session, and please do keep in touch and follow us on Twitter and follow the website, and we'll all just kind of keep this work going. Thank you, everyone. And the recording of this will be available on the OxAir website, so feel free to share it with whoever you think might be interested. All right, take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.